Good afternoon. The Secretary General and the President will make opening remarks, and then we'll have time for a couple of questions. Secretary General.
President Duda, dear Andrzej, welcome back to the NATO headquarters. It's always a pleasure to host you here, and thank you so much for your strong commitment to our alliance and for everything we do together to ensure our security. Poland is a highly valued NATO ally that makes major contributions to our shared security. You host one of NATO's multinational battle groups in the region. You contribute to NATO's Baltic air policing mission, and you host key facilities such as our multinational core northeast and a site for our ballistic missile defense. We met today at a critical time. We discussed Russia's massive military buildup in and around Ukraine. Russia now has deployed well over 100,000 troops with enabling capabilities, including medical units, command and control, and logistics. We also expect around 30,000 Russian troops to be deployed in Belarus, the largest military buildup there since the Cold War. These deployments are not justified, not transparent, and very close to NATO borders. Moreover, Russia has rescheduled its annual exercise of nuclear forces for this month. And we have seen Russia use military exercises before as a cover for aggressive actions. So NATO must remain vigilant and ready. We have already increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance and the readiness of the NATO response force. We are also considering the deployment of additional battle groups to the southeastern part of the NATO alliance. I welcome that the United States is sending more troops to Poland, to Germany, and also to Romania. This is a powerful demonstration of American commitment to our alliance. Other allies are also contributing more forces to NATO on land, in the air, and at sea. Our deployments are defensive and proportionate. They send a clear message: NATO will do whatever is necessary to protect and defend all allies. At the same time, dialogue with Russia is even more important to find a political solution. Today, I reiterate my invitation to Russia to meet with NATO allies in the NATO-Russia Council. We are ready to listen to their concerns, to discuss NATO-Russia relations, risk reduction and transparency, arms control, disarmament and non-proliferation, and other issues that affect our security. But NATO will not compromise on core principles, our ability to protect and defend all allies, and the right of each nation to choose its own path. We discussed the recent joint statement by Russia and China, where for the first time China joins Russia in calling on NATO to stop admitting new members. This is an attempt to deny sovereign nations the right to make their own choices, a right enshrined in key international documents. NATO respects every country's decision to be part of an alliance or not. Our open door policy has been a historic success, spreading freedom and security across Europe. We must respect sovereign decisions, not return to an age of spheres of influence, where the big powers can tell others what they can or cannot do. So President Duda, Andrzej, thank you again for being here today, and NATO can count on Poland, and Poland can always count on NATO. Welcome.
Panie Sekretarzu Generalny,
Mr. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen,
bardzo dziękuję przede wszystkim
thank you very much, first and foremost to you, Secretary General, for this
spotkania.
opportunity. Thank you for being able to meet you today.
Pobytem tutaj w
In
Brukseli
connection with
i
my stay here
spotkaniami,
in
które miałem
Brussels,
wcześniej
and
z
I
panią
also had
przewodniczącą
meetings here before.
Komisji
I met with the
Europejskiej,
President of the European
panem
Commission and
przewodniczącym
Mr. President of the European
Spotkania
Council.
ważne.
I had important
Na każdym z nich
meetings,
mówiliśmy o
and at
sytuacji
every meeting we
bezpieczeństwa,
discussed the
mówiliśmy o
security situation.
kwestii
We also raised
Ukrainy,
the
o tym
Ukrainian
impasie,
issue. We
z którym
discussed
mamy do
the
czynienia.
deadlock which we are
Rozmawialiśmy
faced
oczywiście
with. Of course, we discussed
Unii
as
Europejskiej, ale
members
rzecz
of the
jasna
European Union,
rozmawialiśmy
but
także
clearly and
członkowie
obviously
NATO,
we
że w
discussed
obydwu
also
tych
as
aspektach
NATO
jest nam
members, and we
potrzebna-
said that in
jest nam
both
tutaj
these
potrzebna
aspects
jedność,
we need
pokazywanie tego, że
unity.
działamy razem,
We need to
działamy
demonstrate that we
wspólnie,
act together, that we act jointly,
że mamy tutaj
that
zgodne
we
stanowisko i
have the
cieszę
same
się, że
position
z panem
here.
sekretarzem
And I'm happy
generalnym także
that
te tematy ważne
these
dla
important
Sojuszu
topics, important for the
Północnoatlantyckiego
North Atlantic
dzisiaj
Alliance,
omawiać.
were also discussed in our conversation with Secretary General today. Let me remind you,
Z panem prezydentem
I
Wołodymyrem Zełenskim,
had a
z
meeting
którym
with President
bardzo
Volodymyr
wiele rozmawialiśmy na
Zelensky.
temat
We
aktualnych
talked at
sytuacji
length
na
about the
Ukrainie
current
przed
situation in
kilkunastoma
Ukraine.
dniami,
That happened several days
ale
ago, that
w
meeting.
ostatnim czasie,
But recently,
dokładnie w
and to
ciągu
be more
ostatnich dni,
precise,
dosłownie
in the
odbyłem
last
cały
days,
szereg
I
spotkań
have had a whole
politycznych
series
w
of
Pekinie
political
na
meetings in
marginesie,
Beijing
inauguracji
in the
zimowych
margins
Igrzysk
of the
Olimpijskich,
inauguration of the Olympic Winter
oczywiście dla
Games,
przywódców
but
państw
for
jest
the
zawsze sposobność do tego,
leaders
żeby
of states, it
realizować tą
always
tak
gives an
zwaną
opportunity
dyplomację
to
olimpijską.
implement the
Między innymi
so-called Olympic
w ramach
diplomacy.
tej
Among
wizyty w
others,
Pekinie
as
miałem
part of
także
my visit to
dwustronne spotkanie
Beijing,
z
I
panem
had a bilateral
prezydentem
meeting with the President of China, Mr. Xi Jinping.
Przekazałem
I
panu sekretarzowi
shared
generalnemu
with Secretary
relacje z tego
General
spotkania, a także
what we discussed during that
moje
meeting,
odczucia, jeżeli
and
chodzi o
also I
kwestie bezpieczeństwa w
conveyed
tym
my
najszerszym
sentiment and my
w
feeling
zasadzie wymiarze
concerning the
geopolitycznym
security in the
relacji z
broadest
Sojuszem
geopolitical
Północnoatlantyckim.
dimension of
Tylko
relations
co
with
istotne z
NATO.
punktu widzenia tutaj naszych działań, naszych decyzji i naszych
I
rozważań w
mentioned
ramach
all the
Sojuszu
things that are important for
Północnoatlantyckiego.
us in making
Co do tych
decisions within
aspektów
NATO.
najbliższych,
Speaking about
zwróciłem się
the
do pana sekretarza generalnego
current
z propozycjami po pierwsze,
aspects, I proposed,
nie mam
Mr.
wątpliwości, że jest
Secretary
nam
General.
potrzebne
First of all, I
wzmocnienie
said that we have no doubt whatsoever that we
Sojuszu
need
Północnoatlantyckiego.
the
Wszyscy
reinforcement
widzą,
along
co
the
się
eastern
dzieje.
flank of
Rosja
the
zwiększa swoją
NATO
obecność
alliance. We
militarną w
all
naszej
can
części
see what is
Europy.
happening.
Cały
Russia
czas
is building up its
przybywają
military presence in our
kolejne
part of Europe.
jednostki
We are
rosyjskie,
seeing more
zarówno
Russian troops
najbliższe
arriving.
w pobliże granicy
They are arriving close to the Russian-Ukrainian border, but they are also being deployed to Belarus.
odbywać
And
mają
there,
manewry wojskowe.
military maneuvers are scheduled to take place, but we are all looking at the situation with concern, because as a matter of fact, this Russian presence is going to significantly change the security architecture in our part of Europe if these units, after the end of the exercise, do not return to their garrisons, but if they are left behind in Belarus. Then we can say that Russia will add another military district, and as a matter of fact, this military border between NATO and Russia will increase by another 1,200 kilometers, because this is the length of the Belarusian border with NATO countries today. Hence, there is such a concern. I think we must look at it, we must keep it on our radar. We have to pay attention to it, and we have to react. So generally, two basic elements I would like to stress. First and foremost, I believe that NATO must not withdraw whatsoever, because NATO is a defensive alliance, and never, ever has it demonstrated, especially in recent years, any kind of aggressive behaviors towards Russia. NATO has always adopted a defensive stance, and that is why we, Poles, are a responsible member of the North Atlantic Alliance. It lies in our interest that we keep peace and calm, that no escalation, especially military escalation, happens between NATO and Russia. Generally, we are interested in having no military escalation whatsoever in our part of the world, in our part of Europe. We want to live in peace, we want to develop. Recently, actually only 30 years ago, did we regain our full sovereignty, independence and freedom, and we would like to be able to further develop our country. We would like to further build our prosperity and our fortune, personal fortune. War or a military threat is the very last thing that Polish people would like to see. They don't want to see it. That is why we are committed to NATO, demonstrating that if any ally was attacked, it would stand shoulder to shoulder, that it is unified in its position. And I think that increasing this defensive presence along the eastern flank of NATO will be beneficial to that through deploying additional troops and also through committing additional readiness forces within NATO by reinforcing in this way the forces under the command of SACEUR. But, ladies and gentlemen, there is also a need to strengthen the entire eastern flank along its whole length. I'm not only speaking about the area where Poland has got its border, or I'm not talking about our neighbors, the Baltic states, but I'm also thinking about southern Europe. I believe that along the entire eastern flank, what we need is a reinforcement, a strengthening. It is justified right now. On the upcoming NATO summit, which is ahead of us, I believe that, and I propose this to Mr. Secretary General, I think that we should have meetings in the forum NATO-Ukraine, NATO-Georgia. By the way, I talked to Madam President of Georgia as well on my way to Beijing. I made a stopover in Tbilisi to have a meeting with Madam President and to talk precisely about security matters, to ask about her perspective. As the head of state located on the eastern side of Ukraine, we are bordering Ukraine on the west and Georgia to the east. I wanted to see her perspective and ask about her assessment, how she sees the situation, taking into account her experiences of Georgia. I believe that we should invite Georgia at the level of heads of state, and we should have a meeting in format NATO-Georgia, and we should have also a meeting NATO-Ukraine at the same level to demonstrate our solidarity with these countries and also to show that we are not leaving them to their own devices. They have always been loyal partners of the North Atlantic Alliance, so we should demonstrate to them that NATO also remembers about them. And today, these issues are crucially important also for the credibility of the alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, these were the most important topics that we raised with Secretary General. Once again, thank you for the meeting. Very important to me, and I'm glad that our activities in the era of obvious threats which we are facing are intensive. Let me reiterate, what is most important is demonstrating the unity in every single bit, showing that NATO cannot be divided, does not let itself be divided, countries cooperate with each other, and that the position of NATO is uniform.
We'll go to TVP, lady in blue here.
TVP, bardzo proszę.
Dominika
Ciasic, Polish television.
Question to both President Duda and Secretary General. I would like to ask, do you consider to sending more troops NATO to eastern flank of NATO, and not only American, because we observed that we know the decision of US, but maybe you consider to send more troops also from other countries, alliance countries, and do you consider also some more action, maybe sanction against Russia before Russia will invade Ukraine or maybe some other sovereign state? Thank you.
Yeah, you can start.
Yes, of course. Answering your question, there are two parts to your question. First of all, there is the responsibility of NATO and there is a responsibility of international community or the European Union. On military strengthening, on strengthening the readiness to defense, yes, and the answer is yes. And I do believe that NATO's presence in eastern flank should be increased along the whole eastern flank, starting from the north all the way down to the south. All countries which would like to receive this strengthening should be given such strengthening. I think it should happen. Of course, it would be most advisable if those forces were as multinational as possible in the meaning of the alliance. So I hope that the member states of NATO will show their readiness to deploy their soldiers as part of this reinforcement. Let me only recall that Polish soldiers today are already deployed to the eastern flank of NATO. They are present in Latvia as part of enhanced forward presence. They are also present as part of tailored forward presence in Romania, in Craiova. So we are implementing our commitments, keeping them. We believe this is a very important thing, and I hope that NATO member states will take such a decision in the nearest future, that such reinforcement will happen. Today, we have had this decision already taken by the United States. 2,000 troops have been deployed by the United States and by the decision of the President of the United States. Those troops have been deployed to Poland and generally to the eastern flank. Nevertheless, I would like these decisions to be taken at the level of the whole alliance. I would like these to be our common decisions and common forces, which would reinforce the eastern flank. Now, about sanctions. Well, today I talked to Madam President von der Leyen about European sanctions, which are being prepared right now by Madam President and by the European Commission. This is a proposal which will be submitted to the European Council. It is a very detailed, in-depth work. And I thanked Madam President today that she was so concrete in the meetings before and that she spoke so eloquently about those proposals. I assume that the introduction of these sanctions, if they were necessary to be introduced, I do hope that they will be painful, and I hope that it won't pay off to Russia.
First, on the issue of increased presence in the eastern part of the alliance, I have actually 3 points to make. One, we have already increased our presence. Under the existing authorities of NATO's Supreme Commander in Europe, Sarkar, he has already increased the presence in the air, on land and at sea, and we've also seen how NATO allies like Spain, Denmark, United Kingdom, the United States and others have actually provided more capabilities for surveillance, for reassurance activities in the eastern part of the alliance, and particularly in the Black Sea region. So this has already taken place, and it reflects the fact that NATO is there to protect and to defend, and also to very closely monitor and follow what's going on in and around Ukraine, also close to NATO borders. Second, we have increased the readiness of the NATO response force. This force can be deployed on very short notice. The lead elements, the very high readiness joint task force, can be deployed within a matter of days with the existing readiness levels, and allies have also committed more troops, especially the United States have assigned 8,500 troops to the NATO response force. These forces can be deployed, if needed, quickly to NATO territory. And thirdly, we are considering more longer-term adjustment to our posture, our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. No final decision has been made on that, but there is a process now going on within NATO, also of course in close consultation with our military commanders, to adjust our presence in the eastern part of the alliance to further strengthen our deterrence and defense. If Russia really wants less NATO close to the borders, they get the opposite. We saw that after 2014, when Russia went in and annexed Crimea and went into Donbas, to eastern Ukraine. After that, NATO, for the first time in our history, deployed battle groups to the eastern part of the alliance. Also something we agreed at the Warsaw Summit back in 2016. And since then, NATO allies have stepped up significantly, both with higher readiness, with more troops, and more air policing, and more presence in the eastern part in general. So, yes, we have increased presence. We are ready to quickly further increase with the NATO response force if needed, and we are looking into more long-term adjustments of our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. On the sanctions, this is, of course, it's not for NATO to decide sanctions, but welcome the fact that NATO allies, the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, and also, of course, the European Union have made it very clear that if Russia uses force against Ukraine again, there will be a high price to pay, also in the form of economic sanctions.
Okay, we have time for only one question, so we'll go to Polsat, the lady in green.
It's actually a follow-up, Secretary General. You increased the military presence at the eastern flank. The decisions were made 6 years ago. And now we have thousands of Russian soldiers again. And you are saying that you are not planning to increase it either further away, what is expected by Poland, because the last decisions were made years ago, and now the security architecture is yet again under a big pressure. Are you afraid of further escalation?
Well, we have increased the presence over the last weeks. That comes on also NATO. Also, first of all, we increased after 2014, especially following the after legal annexation of Crimea in 2014, and then after the NATO decisions at the Warsaw Summit in 2016, we established the battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance. That happened some years ago. You're right, but then over the last weeks, since Russia started to increase its presence in around Ukraine with tens of thousands of combat-ready troops, more than 100,000 in total, then we have increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. So that has happened recently. This is partly within existing NATO missions and activities. We call them enhanced and vigilance activities. They are under SACEUR's current mandate, and we have scaled up those activities with more planes, with more ships, and also more presence, also in not only actually in the Black Sea region or the southeast of the alliance, but also in the eastern part of the alliance in general. Then NATO allies have augmented that further with increased presence. We see the UK has announced that they have troops and forces, and then of course also the United States had actually started to deploy and have sent in more troops to Poland. They are in the process of doing that to Romania, and also some additional personnel to Germany, in total around 3,000. So the increased presence I'm talking about is an increased presence over the last weeks, and we are in the process of stepping up. Then we have increased the readiness of the NATO response force to be able to deploy it quickly if needed. And the NATO response force is around 40,000 troops that can be deployed on short notice. And then on top of that, again, we are discussing more long-term adjustments. So we speak about many different things. In total, it's a significant increase. But let me add that our main goal is to find a political solution. And we strongly believe in the combination of deterrence, defense, and dialogue. And for us, there is no contradiction between deterrence, defense, and dialogue. Actually, as long as we are united, as long as we are strong, we can also talk to Russia. We have invited Russia for dialogue. I reiterate today my invitation to Russia to sit down and to negotiate and talk in good faith. We are ready to discuss a wide range of issues: arms control, disarmament, transparency. And we have conveyed to Russia a document listing all the issues where we think it's possible to find a common ground. We're ready to listen to their concerns, and they should de-escalate and sit down with NATO and NATO allies and find a peaceful political way forward.
Thank you very much. This concludes this press conference. Thank you.